Hi everyone, Richard Lewis here. I did say I was going to start doing more video editorials on my Twitter recently. I've had a bit of a hiatus, a few weeks here and there, while I've been trying to get healthy again and reduce my workload. So now I'm in a position to be able to do more of these kind of videos. And disclaimer, this one's going to be about esports journalism. Obviously, it's a topic that I'm very interested in and very passionate about, and you should stick to what you know, I guess, is the moral of the story. So if that doesn't interest you, it's okay. You can fuck off now. I've got the click out of you. It's good. Please leave. But if you think you might be interested in it, listen on, okay? So what I'm going to talk about is The Score, which is a online esports publication for mobile apps. I want to talk about content sponsorship and media sponsorship and coverage partnerships. Okay, so that's the topic. Now, I want to start at the beginning and just say I was real happy when The Score came along and announced they were going to move into esports. They're a big sports publication. People know who they are. A lot of traffic. And, of course, it generates more jobs for journalists in the industry. There's more money flowing around for journalists, which leads to a better quality. There's more competition between publications. Already, we've had a few scoops. I think one of their writers trumped me by about 20-30 seconds to the Wicked leaving Alliance announcement. So all of these things are good for the field, and it is the field that I care about most in the industry, journalism and journalistic excellence. But shortly after they were announced and they brought their team in, which, some people were more experienced than others. For example, it's headed up by Slasher. He needs no introduction. And then, other guys like Fion and people like that who maybe weren't quite as well known but are building a reputation for themselves. They come in and, do Raven, guys like this, and they slot underneath Slasher in, the publication hierarchy. But I don't know what it was. Like, shortly after the Score was announced, it's just like almost everyone who works there just became this insufferable presence on social media. There was a real high level of arrogance to their tweets and their social media output. They started acting like they were industry leaders as opposed to the new kids on the block. And I just didn't fucking understand this at all. I get it, okay? Like, you've had money, you've had budget. You've got to put together your own little dream team, and you're fully employed. But that's never happened before, right? So I am perplexed by this assumption of success on the part of The Score. I think it's definitely worth mentioning that just because you throw a bunch of money at something means you're not necessarily going to be successful. Now, Matt Demers, who's the kind of deputy editor over there, he, in particular, just got this massive esports messiah complex, as you'll be able to see from the tweets that I'm going to put on screen while I'm talking over it. To say things like, "Oh, hey, you're on our radar, guys. Well, thanks a lot for that, Mr. Pulitzer Prize winning publication. It's great that you're thinking about us lowly peons, many of which have experience that exceeds your own." So I'm talking about other writers that don't have jobs and certainly weren't approached by The Score. So I found that really condescending. And then on top of that, they constantly harp on about, the war room, which is just their office. If the simple act of hiring office space made people special companies and award-winning and excellent in their field, I think we'd be handing out a lot of fucking awards. It would be a good time to be a trophy maker. Ultimately, it means very little. Oh, cool, you have a pool table where you work? It's hardly Willy Wonka's fucking chocolate factory, is it? And it didn't end there. Matt Demers, again, he got invited onto a show called The Any Key. And then he started taking swipes at other publications and their TMZ reporting, which you'll be able to see from this clip here.
In terms of, social media and reporting and that kind of stuff. But just like philosophy and stuff like that. Because, I think what sets us apart from a lot of other publications is that we're a sports publication first, where a lot of other publications are either coming from video game reporting, which is a completely different subset, or entertainment reporting. They aren't treating this as sports first, and that's the main thing. Is that we don't.
Is there a difference in that kind of reporting style?
There is, totally.
Oh, okay.
It's just we don't report on champion releases. Why would we? It doesn't apply to sports. It doesn't apply to the sports side of things. We don't even reply to community drama because why would we? It's as long as
That's very interesting.
That's very interesting.
I didn't even think about that because
as long as it doesn't, the thing is, as long as it doesn't as long as it doesn't cross over into the esports side of things, why would we cover it? Like the
What
whole,
about sorry?
the spectate faker thing. Spectate faker doesn't revolve around esports. So
Well,
why
that's
would we
really
cover it?
interesting
It's like
because
where
it's
other
sensational.
well, what my editor in the chat is saying is, TMZ esports is a joke we kind of use around the office anyway in terms of like what we do and don't cover wrong. So like it's just a thing that carries over from the rest of the score in the sense that we have a commitment both to the reputation of the publication more than we do to getting things out first. And because we have the app and because we have the ability to drive traffic to the app and mobile, we don't rely as much on Reddit. So essentially, we don't rely on it, and we aren't looking to discount it. Like the traffic spikes are nice, and we're never going to say no to them. But at the same time, it's kind of just like we are not in a position to try to write for Reddit. Like I said, we could have written something for Spectate Faker, and we could have tried to make it, make a point of writing about it just to write about it and to get in on it while it's hot. But to be honest, we were just kind of like, you know what? There's no reason we should write about this. There's no reason, there's nothing no feasible reason.
No feasible reason?
Unless it carries over into, an LCS player contract or something like that. Like say next season, they say that, your stream is dictated based on, like your entire play is now a property of Riot Games. Then we cover it because it affects literally every player who is playing League of Legends.
And of course it had the potential to do that, which is why it was so important and why people were wanting to report on it in the first place. You can't just say, well, see that thing that's brewing over there, we're going to leave that and ignore that, and when it actually becomes something big, then we'll write about it. That's not how the news works. You've got to report on stuff as it's happening, be there at the start, report on it, talk about what it could possibly mean, the potential impact it could have for the people, for all of the players in League of Legends in this particular instance. You need to be there on the ground floor reporting about it from the start. You can't just come in at the end and go, yep, well, that happened. That's not really what we should be aspiring to do as journalists.
But at the moment, it's a contract dispute. We don't know the entirety of it. We will never know the entirety of it.
Well, not if we don't do any journalism, not if we don't do any investigating, not if we don't do any digging. Yeah, you're right, we never will. We're the people who were meant to make that happen, Matt. Me and you. That's our job. That's what we should be doing. You can't just say, oh, well, we'll never get to the bottom of that, so, what's the point in even trying? Fuck it.
Like, we're still growing, so to speak. So I can't really, say we are, going to be, the final boss of esports journalism.
Well, how very modest of you. Now, keep in mind that all of these little digs, all of this talk of BuzzFeed reporting, that was talking about Spectate Faker, the whole incident involving somebody that was broadcasting a particular player's games on a Twitch channel when that player had signed a deal with Azubu, and Azubu had issued a DMCA takedown, which they didn't have the right to do, and Riot got involved and said it was wrong, and was it? There was no legal basis for it. This incident here actually went on to set precedent in terms of what Riot are going to allow people to broadcast. It opened up a huge can of worms, and ultimately it has changed the face of the streaming landscape in 2015. Now that to me is hugely important. It's definitely going to impact on players moving forward. It's going to impact on streamers moving forward, and I'm sure it's going to get cited when the next big drama comes up about what you can and can't stream according to the laws of Riot. The idea that wasn't newsworthy, it wasn't worth reporting on because it didn't affect the game, it wasn't directly about the sport, is gibberish, frankly. I would question anyone making that editorial call. And sure, maybe it's not Pulitzer Prize winning reportage. Maybe at the end of the year no one's going to say, hey Travis, Richard Doran, that Spectate Faker piece you did, that was the highlight of the year for me, I hope you get nominated for an award. Sure, maybe it is ultimately in the grand scheme of things throwaway. I'm sure it will be eclipsed by far bigger stories, but at that particular time it absolutely was newsworthy, and I'm sure that it's going to get brought up time and time and time again. It's going to be one of the things that defined 2015. How can you say that this isn't worth reporting on at that particular moment? Certainly there was no bigger talking point in League of Legends there and then. I actually find the score going out and sermonizing about what's good and bad journalism to be a little bit strange as well, because I know firsthand that this publication had access to the MYM and Corey story first and elected not to publish it. I'm guessing on the same grounds, right, that it's not important enough to report about. They had a reporter that had obtained the recording, that had done all the legwork, that knew the story, that had the conversation logs that was so incriminating from the MYM CEO. They had the full picture, everything that the Daily Dot went on to report. And yet the editorial staff over at The Score decided we're not going to publish this story because we don't want to rock the boat. And again, given how important it was within the context of not only that individual player welfare, that player's welfare, but also the broader discussion it generated about player welfare, and Riot are now having to be very cognizant about that for all of the organisations that they have in LCS. I have no idea why any publication worth its salt would want to stray away from something that's so important for the industry. Now, it's also got to be said, it was a big traffic generator for us, but I don't necessarily think that was clickbait. I think that's a story that generated so much interest and so much traffic because it was important and shocking, and people could recognise it as such. So again, really perplexed and almost a little bit frustrated that when it comes to something that big, another publication wasn't willing to run the story because of esports politics.
And we don't want to sacrifice the reputation of the publication in order to kind of just get to the front page of Reddit. It's just a simple thing that we realize that it's probably going to mean a trending down, not dead downward. It's going to mean like a lower overall traffic, like long term. But it means that we're just going to grow slowly, and we're all about the organic growth.
So all about the organic growth that rather than let your work do the talking and attract readers through that, you go out and you sponsor events and tournaments and try and get your name talked about on streams by inducing the people to promote you. And that brings me to the next thing I want to talk about, and that is their sponsoring of events. Now, I find this very problematic. They've sponsored Beyond the Summit in Dota to get their name out there in the Dota community, and they're going to branch out and perhaps do some content there. But how can an impartial news outlet actually sponsor anyone? I want you to think about how that would work, because it's a big enough potential conflict of interest when businesses sponsor news publications. It's a constant tightrope act about doing honest reporting and not losing the income that keeps the publication afloat. And when a news corporation sponsors someone to help grow their business, it's an invitation to be held to ransom. Now, I dread to think what the agreements actually look like. I've been in this position in the past before where we've had sponsors come to us, or partners, and people who've bought ad space on our publications, and they've specifically said, we don't want Richard Lewis to write this story. And I was always in the fortunate position to have management in the company that backed me to the hilt and stood by it. When I was doing Heaven Media publications, there was all sorts of organisations, be it team organisations, people that run leagues and tournaments, literally picking up the phone to the CEO and the owner of the company saying, what do we need to do to pull this story by Richard Lewis, or what can we do to get rid of Richard Lewis and stop him writing about us? Fortunately, the publication I work for, so that's not going to work. We've got an ethical responsibility to be impartial. The fact that you advertise on our publication doesn't give you any special privileges. So it's problematic at the best of times. Everyone knows this. Everyone who has run a publication knows this. If you go the other way and you're sponsoring a personality or an event or a league or a tournament, and you're using their presence to gain attention and hopefully traffic for your publication, which you will then in turn, of course, monetize, you're just begging to be held to ransom by that entity, whoever it is. They can turn around and go, well, we want you to write 3 or 4 puff pieces about us and say good things about us, or we want you to completely ignore this scandal that's going around, and you're going to be the only publication that isn't going to report on it, but you certainly are precluded from doing so. Otherwise, we'll pull your sponsorship and your name and your brand won't be out there. So it's strange bedfellows as I see it. So when you're a publication, there's this thing in the industry, and it's it does operate in media outside of esports, but certainly I've always found it to be a bit more insidious and prevalent in esports journalism, and that is this idea of being coverage partners. Now, when you're a coverage partner, this is that you have the right to attend the event, you have the right to report on the event, your reporting will be facilitated by the organisers, they'll give you press space, they'll give you access to personalities and figureheads, whoever, that they don't give to anybody else. That's effectively what they do. You promote their event, they enable you to get content other non-coverage partners can't get. That's how it always works. Now, the publication is always on the losing end because they need the traffic, they need to have that content on their website. So again, coverage partnerships get used like weapons almost in the esports industry. I think back to a time when the Championship Gaming Series was around. I was at a small publication when they first came out, something called Source Junkie. But what the CGS were doing was they were going around to everybody and they were saying, you got to be a coverage partner with us, you've got to be a coverage partner with us, otherwise we're not going to cooperate with you, we're not going to give you any scoops. All of our players will be told they can't do interviews with you, even outside of event time. You won't be allowed to attend the events, we won't give you press credentials, all of this stuff. So they made very clear that it was join us or fuck off, or we'll try and crush you, we'll try and squeeze you out, because the Championship Gaming Series was the biggest thing at the time. It was an easy traffic generator, everyone was really excited about it, and of course it spanned multiple games. So what we did was we were like, well look, we're not going to be official coverage partners with you, because they wanted to exert influence over us. They wanted to tell us what we couldn't write. And when we were in talks about it with Source Junkie, there was an incident where their franchise logos and names of the franchises, which hadn't been announced, got leaked. And we had the leak in front of us, and we were like, well, we're going to publish this. And at first they went down the road of, what can we do to make you not publish this leak? Can we offer you money? Can we, facilitate? Is there anything we can do for you? And we were just like, well, no, not really. We're not interested in that. The guy who ran the blog, the guy who ran Source Junkie, was a fairly independently wealthy cocaine addict with a predilection for Eastern European prostitutes. He was a very eccentric guy, and I miss him immensely. He was a very interesting character. But he was just like, no, there's absolutely no way on God's green earth we're going to acquiesce and take money in exchange for not publishing this story. We're going to run with it. And then, of course, they tried the threats of suing the publication, but that was never going to go anywhere anyway. And the story got ran. But after that point, we weren't really allowed to be coverage partners. Now, I ended up getting moved across to a website that did become official coverage partners, and I got to go to CGS, and I actually got a job with CGS through through working for a coverage partner. So I had two jobs. I had one job at one publication, and you had to be Mr. Impartial Journalist within the interests of that publication, but I also worked directly for the Championship Gaming Series. Now, in my naivety at the time, I thought there's no way they would hold me hostage. There's no way they would allow me to not tell the truth. They must understand I got the responsibility to do that. But actually, they didn't. You couldn't write anything negative whatsoever about the Championship Gaming Series, and every time anyone attempted to on the publication, we're going to pull your coverage, we're going to pull your coverage partnership. That's what we got told all the time. In the end, this is what invariably led to me getting fired from the CGS. And after I got fired from the CGS, guess what they did? The Championship Gaming Series reached out to every other publication in esports and said, if you take Richard Lewis on, even in a voluntary capacity, even if he works for you for free, we'll pull your coverage partnership. So it was incredibly hard for me to even get work because of these guys when they were in the industry. And if Gotfrag hadn't have existed and hadn't have resisted what the CGS was trying to do, I probably wouldn't be here doing this video right now talking about it. So I got to say, I think that these coverage partnerships, it's like a throwback to the dark ages. And yes, I've done the dance. And yes, when I was doing that thing with CGS and working for Cadred simultaneously, I got to be honest, that was a really dumb thing to do. And that was like me trying to have my cake and eat it. So I don't think I'm immune to criticism for having done it in the past. Indeed, I think that's why I can speak with a clear authority on the topic now. So when I saw the score announced that they were coverage partners with IEM, again, I just kind of, like, really, is that where the industry's headed right now? You know, it almost feels like a regression. And I got to say, a coverage partnership and a sponsorship are two different things. But all of the hallmarks of this deal, everything points to it being a sponsorship. You know, there's advertisements for the score all over. You know, and that just begs, for me, again, a real pertinent question: what would happen if something really bad happened at the event? You know, if ESL dropped the ball in such a cataclysmic way and the event was a clusterfuck, would we read about it on the score? I'm sure people on the score would say, yeah, of course you would. Well, there's no agreement like that. But I can't help but feel that this sort of agreement, this sort of partnership, does open itself to the potential to be abused. And again, I think that we need to be as kind of impartial and unrelated as possible when it comes to journalism and reportage and working within an industry and working with businesses in the industry. Now, I did read the article that Slasher wrote. It was like a little mini interview with Carmack, and it read suspiciously like native advertising. And for those of you who don't know what native advertising is a form of online advertising that matches the form and function of the platform on which it appears. For example, an article written by an advertiser to promote their product, but using the same form as an article written by the editorial staff. The word native refers to the content's coherence with other media on the platform. So you'll have seen these. In any games media magazine, it's taking it to the next level with this mouse, and it'll be a description of why the mouse is so good and why you should buy it, but it's done in the format as if it was an editorial piece, an article about the mouse itself, but it's inherently biased because it's been paid for. It's native advertising. And for years and years and years, publications used to try and get away with this, and it was very hard to spot. And people have become more savvy about native advertising now, and there's now rules in place that you need to say when something's an advertisement or not. You need to be transparent about it. And this is something that's happening more and more in the games media, but nowhere near as much as it should. I definitely see things that are clear native advertising to me. And certainly there's no, this is an advertisement, this is an advertorial, posted on it. So I definitely think that's something that we need to be straying away from. Native advertising is, again, very, very insidious. For me, it's an abuse of a privilege and a position to be the people that get to report to other people impartially the news and the events that are happening in our industry. And that's, again, it's a very important privilege. It's a very important responsibility, and one that has to be wielded absolutely in a responsible fashion. There can't be the opportunity for abuse. There can't even be the question mark. So, I feel like we haven't really learned anything from the mainstream gaming media in the past 18 months. You know, gamers have been crying out for more ethical approaches to journalism, and they're absolutely right to do so. People were being bribed and coerced and bullied into putting out reports and putting out articles and interviews that didn't truly reflect what was true, and didn't even reflect the writer's opinion in a lot of instances. Some people were effectively being coerced. It's like, if you don't write this, you're not going to have a job. Ultimately, the editors do have a lot of power and get to dictate who writes what. Now, when Gamergate sort of blew up, I was still a big believer in the idea that Gamergate is about ethics in gaming journalism, and it absolutely is a discussion that needs to be had, because I worked as a games reviewer as well. I know that when I used to turn my reviews in, if they weren't good reviews, depending on the publisher, my editor would change it. He would boost the reviews accordingly on the basis that they won't give us any free games to review. They'll pull our partnership. And we've seen so many examples of cronyism and nepotism and favourable reporting and bias in gaming media that this has started to turn off the people that would use and trust those publications, and we're driving them away in droves. And that's good, because if you do engage in that reprehensible behaviour, I think it's great that we've got an informed readership that are like, no, we're not going to put up with that. We're not going to reward the publications that indulge in that sort of behaviour. Total Biscuits talked about it a lot as well, and I think we do need to have a serious look at how the gaming media works, and reforms need to be put in place. Now, when it comes to esports reportage, I think, again, things like this, it's worse. It's worse than anything that the people in Gamergate were complaining about in the first place. And I think we need to really have a serious thought about what coverage partnership means. And do we want to be having our media outlets in bed with the people that run the tournaments and everything else? I think it's particularly interesting because while Carmack did that interview, Carmack himself was the guy that would call out bullshit like this back when he was still working on the job. And obviously, I have no doubt that he's very aware of that, even as he's entered into this sort of partnership with the Score. I'm sure this is something for him to think about when he starts bemoaning the standard of esports journalism he likes to do about twice a year. So overall, I've got to say, I think it's been a good start to the year for esports journalism, and certainly we ended 2014 strongly. I think there's more diversity. I think there's higher quality. I think people are now making time for good work, and we're moving away from just content creation and creating bland vanilla pieces that are designed to titillate you to really doing some interesting things, investigative journalism, chronicling the history of esports, more business and industry related topics. So we're headed in the right direction overall. I just think things like this are what going to be drag us back to the dark days when people start getting a bit more concerned about the finances of esports journalism, rather than how you can make a living, rather than actually just focusing on doing the work. And I think that's just a general message to everybody. I think when you're a journalist, just do the work. Do the work, and then you get to be smug about it. You can't set yourselves up as being, hey, this is what we're going to do, right, guys? We're going to be amazing. Because if you never deliver on it, you're going to look pretty stupid by the end. And again, this is something that numerous people in esports, not just journalists, have done time and time again. My final thought is just that I think, all things told, with the way the industry's headed and the responsibility that we've got in this growing industry, and esports isn't a niche anymore. The Games Developer Conference proved that hands down. This was the big year for esports, where esports was front and centre. But we need to be creating clearer divisions between the press and the media and the businesses, and not blurring the lines further. Anyway, thanks a lot for listening, and I'll